Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to go over a theory that I have on why Gregor didn't actually execute Order 66. So in the last episode of the Bad Batch, we saw him and he seemed to be, again, pretty different from the rest of the crew. Now, clearly he was put on that planet to train all of the recruits, the new stormtroopers that will be coming in and taking over the place of the clones from the Empire. Now, at the time of the Empire, a lot of people wonder, why clones are being taken out of there and why are stormtroopers being put in? Well, so far from our understanding, and this comes from Legends content, which now seems to be canon as well, as Gregor explained it to the Bad Batch. It seems that Palpatine wants numbers, and this was something that he was always more interested in. He wanted sheer size and volume of an army versus the efficacy of how well they actually perform in battle. So the clones, while them being, let's say, super soldiers in comparison to stormtroopers, were too expensive and they weren't as big as an army could be if you just had recruits coming from all around the galaxy. And this is partially why I think that the Empire stopped the contract with the Kaminoans. Now, of course, we'll understand more as time goes on, but I don't want to digress on that in this video. Now, Gregor, as we saw in the Clone Wars Season 5, Episode 12, got blown up. And it kind of seems to be this common theme, in my opinion, that anytime someone gets blown up or gets some trauma to their head, something either gets activated or deactivated. We've seen this with, Gregor. We've seen this with Wrecker. We've seen this with Fives. Now, of course, Fives was, pretty much put together back with all cybernetic parts. But still, the point is, I believe that everyone who gets some sort of heat or blown up in some sort of way, much like how Crosshair did, which leads me to the next theory that I'll mention in a minute, they all seem to be suffering from a lack of inhibitor chips being functional in their brains. So I think one thing that happened in all of these scenarios, and maybe this is something that even happened with Captain Hauser, either that or there were just no Jedi on Ryloth at the time, and he had nothing to execute Order 66 on. Now, I know what some people are thinking. They might be saying, well, how can the heat from an external explosion affect the internal chip that's in someone's head? Well, it may not just be the heat. It could be the impact, sure, but also it could be the magnetic frequency that is emitted from a blast. And what I mean by that is the electromagnetic frequency. So depending on the blast itself, some sort of electrical current that could go off, it obviously something created an explosion. So I'm thinking, coupled with the explosion that could have happened, the head trauma of them possibly knocking their noggin somewhere on the ground or to a wall, and then with the possible electromagnetic frequency that was emitted from the blast, could very well indeed malfunction the chip, or at best, make it completely stop working. Now, the inverse can also be concluded, I believe, and this is kind of what happened to Wrecker. He hit his head, and then all of a sudden, the chip started to get activated. Another example is Crosshair. His chip wasn't really working all that well. It was working a little bit more than his brother's, as we saw in the beginning of the season. And then once they upped the frequency when he was in that machine, it seemed like he was full throttle. Now, this leads me to my next theory. Okay, so I think Crosshair isn't really working under the orders of Order 66 anymore. I don't think the chip is even working in his head. I think he's just running off of pure aggression towards his brothers, and the fact that he always felt elite towards them anyways. Perhaps he was jealous, perhaps he was just feeling that they were insubordinate. Either way, I don't think that he's being brainwashed. I don't think he's being controlled at this point. I think he's fully autonomous, and I think he's just running under his own rules, and he just wants to kill his brothers. Now, another theory about Gregor not executing Order 66 is that perhaps the clone commandos, maybe they had better self-control when it came to being programmed or being controlled themselves from a chip within their own heads. But I don't really think that's the case with Gregor. I think with Gregor, him just being blown up really knocked the inhibitor chip off of its proper spot in his brain and ended in him just being normal. Now, as for Captain Hauser, I'm not really sure. Captain Hauser is a very interesting character, and his little arc there showed us something that we had not seen before with Order 66, which could be the case with Gregor as well. He could possibly just be, the inhibitor chip isn't working all that much anymore as some time has passed now, and maybe now the clones are able to think for themselves a little bit. Gregor was a leader, so it wouldn't surprise me if he just started to think for himself and say, hey, why are we even doing this? The Empire isn't really all that great, and how can we just switch all of our ideologies so quickly from the Republic? You know, what happened to the Jedi? They were our friends. How could they all of a sudden be our enemies? And all of these different things. There's so many different avenues that they could take with Gregor's control over Order 66 that I'm pretty excited to learn about it, and I hope that we get to see more of him in this show, because I think he's, first of all, a very cool character, and it's always great seeing OG characters because it helps tie in so much with the Clone Wars and connect different timelines as well. Now, the next character that we need to find is Wolf, and I'm not too sure where he is at this point. I don't even know if we'll see him this season. We may see him in the next season or even in another show, but it almost seems like Gregor doesn't even need to undergo the extraction of the Order 66 chip within his head. The inhibitor chip is probably just malfunctioned at this point, and if anyone went up to him and said Order 66, he would be like, "What's that?" But as we know, it does get taken out at some point, even though I think it's pretty dormant and probably doesn't even work anymore. It's unfortunate the way he dies in the end in Rebels, but I feel like his character arc is really nice and smooth, and it allowed us to see his more funny side later on in Rebels as he was an old man. Albeit, I think he could have had a little bit less on the comedic, almost crazy kooky side, and a little more on the serious, badass war vet side. That being said, he's always been one of my favorite clones, just for the fact that he was a clone commando, and I always really appreciated his tenacity and his sacrifice that he gave in Season 5. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about this. This video was completely unscripted, so sorry if it was a little bit unpolished and a little bit choppy, but I just wanted to give my thoughts and put it along, towards some images and stuff like that as usual to help draw the story of what I'm trying to say in the theory. If you guys agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below. And of course, please let me know your thoughts on the forums at StarWarsTheory.com. I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, remember, the Force will be with you. Always.